We have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in. I'm Rosette Garcia. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego. And again, thank you so much for coming out this morning. I'm going to start by just giving you a brief preview of what we have planned for you today. You can see that doing introductions, we'll hear first from our guest speaker. Then we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. At that time, you will get up. We'll have food here. You'll get up and grab your lunch, serve yourself lunch, take your seats again, and then we'll call the business, our business meeting to order. This will be a working lunch, so you will eat and vote. Eat, listen, and vote, okay? Then I'm going to do a few member acknowledgments. I'll walk you through a brief president's report. Our treasurer will come up and we'll do a quick review of our financial situation. She'll present the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. Then we'll move on to bylaws and look at amendments that we are needing to make this year. We'll hear about that from Marianne. We'll move on next to the election of our nominating committee for next year and the election of our new board of directors. So then we'll do our business meeting. We'll take the action items, proposed budget, bylaws, amendments, election of directors, and directions to the board. The directions to the board are when our members get to tell us, the board members, what ideas you have and any comments or suggestions that you have, perhaps topics or initiatives that you'd like us to consider. And we take these things seriously, so you might be thinking about it now throughout the meeting. There are cards on the table and pens. We take these in writing at the end of the meeting. I always start our meeting by reminding us of our mission, who we are, what we stand for, why we're here. So the League, we work to encourage active and informed public participation in government at all levels and to increase understanding of major public policy issues. Our vision, we envision a democracy where everyone has the right, the desire, the confidence, and the knowledge to participate in our civic life. And then I always like to remind all of us that we are strictly and proudly nonpartisan, which means that we never support or oppose any candidate for office, any elected official, or any political party. So, let's hear first from our speaker, Professor Goggin. Let me tell you a little bit about him. So delighted to welcome him. He's going to be discussing a relevant and timely topic, one that our members have expressed a great deal of interest in. He is an associate professor in the political science department at SDSU, San Diego State University. His interests center on partisan polarization in modern American politics. He focuses, these are not in order. He focuses on how information in media and electoral campaigns can distort public perceptions of politicians and of the institutions themselves, and in turn, how this affects the strategic behavior of the officials in these institutions. So, again, thank you for coming this morning. We're so happy to welcome you. Please join me in welcoming Professor Stephen Goggin.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about misinformation, disinformation, its effects, and a number of related topics. And particularly in this era, right, when we think about, right, artificial intelligence tools, other things on the internet these days, so it may appear something like this, right? A big machine that just churns out lie after lie after lie, right, and may influence people. This created with AI, right? AI can't spell, hence some of the little lettering issues here, right? But generated in the style of Andy Warhol. With this technology, you can do lots of wonderful lies and things. Here's another image of a misinformation machine in the style of Fernando Botero, right? Colombian artist, right? You can keep going. You might be able to guess the artist. This one, right, is generated in terms of misinformation. And the thing about AI is it's a new thing. But the idea of the internet and the media being a misinformation machine is quite old. This cartoon in Puck magazine from 1910 showing, right, yellow journalism, a jester here with attacks on honest officials, venom, sensationalism. This idea of the media and the sources we might use for information lying to us is not particularly new. And a lot of the incentives are very similar, right, in 1910 as they are today. And understanding those can help you understand and help try to avoid, right, the pernicious impacts of this. So I want to talk about kind of 4 big questions. Definitionally, first, what actually misinformation entails, and think about how it can vary, because understanding that variation can help you understand how to avoid it. Thinking about why it exists. We often assume it's because people want us to believe a particular thing, but there's actually quite a few other reasons why we might encounter this on the internet and elsewhere. Think about how we measure and some of the difficulty in assessing its practical impacts. And finally, of course, the main topic, right, most of us want to know about is how can we actually address it and grapple with it. Talking about the first 3, because understanding those helps us understand why, right, some of the popular ideas to help kind of curb it may actually not be as impactful or as useful as we might think. So you can think about misinformation as a broad category here. And in fact, right, this is a real statement. I'm not lying to you. I'm not misinformation. As last year, Joe Biden said, I know I'm 198 years old. This is clearly false, right? He is not 198 years old. It's a lie. It's misinformation. But as we all kind of reacted, it's a joke. It's very obviously a joke. And jokes are predicated on information being wrong, right, to make us laugh and to play up, right, and in contrast particular things. And so when you start to think about that fact is, well, if jokes are included, right, what else is included? Just, right, anything that is not, right, factual. And so when we talk about misinformation, people often, right, think about a subset of it, calling it disinformation, right? Things that are intended to be misleading, that you're intended to be believable enough, right, that it take root and plant in your head and you believe to be true when it actually is not. And when we think about kind of a gradient, a number of scholars have kind of put kind of gradients out there from the least intended to be misleading, things like parody and satire, and this quote from Joe Biden, or jokes or stuff that's obviously wrong, but you should get it, right, if you are aware of the circumstances, to things that are entirely fabricated, and lots of middle ground where things may be mildly misleading, right, or the headline doesn't really reflect what is in the article you're reading, or there maybe is a misleading photo or a little bit of context missing, there's a huge, massive amount of variation here. And importantly, there's a lot of variation amongst these and how easy they are to detect then. Entirely fabricated stories are often sometimes really, really hard to understand, right, or detect, right, whereas other things, right, fake links to make it look like it's a credible news source or other things may be far more easy to detect. When you think about misinformation, right, and its existence, you may ask yourself, right, and many people do, right, well, why would someone create this? Why would someone lie, right? And there's a lot of incentives there. The most obvious one that people think about, particularly in politics, is that you're lying to people because you want to persuade them to believe something else, to vote a particular way or support a candidate or a policy or something that they wouldn't or ordinarily do. And it is true that some people are out there, right, trying to persuade others, but a large segment, right, of the misinformation we might encounter online is often intended to reinforce or mobilize, right, or get people who are already going to vote a particular way, make sure they stay that way, right, and stay, right, kind of within the party line of that particular point. There's also a lot of good research, comparatively, right, in many regimes that have very strong censorship, including China and Russia and other places, that you can use misinformation not for a super pernicious purpose to try to make people believe lies, but to drown out, right, real information out there. One of the takeaway points I hope you don't take from today as we discuss is that a lot of misinformation is out there to make you believe, well, everything is made up, right? To drown out the signal in the actual noise. And in fact, right, it can be used in this way so that people kind of step back and don't believe anything they hear, which is also a very significant problem, as you should not do that. when we look back at examples of massive misinformation, right, misinformation campaigns in 2016 and 2020 and other elections, one of the big incentives on the table is actually not these first three, but in fact, you can make money on the internet with ads, with other revenue. And in fact, a lot of people who might be selling lies to you are not actually in it to politically change your beliefs, but purely out there to make money. And there's a lot of ways in which Google and many major tech companies are working, right, to discourage this, right, and prevent this. When you talk about politics, when you talk about the media, right, there's often a distinguishing kind of term we use in thinking about supply side versus demand side, misinformation, media bias, and other things. And it sounds technical, but it's very simply, is that are people out there lying to you because they want to lie to you, because they want to change your beliefs? Or are people out there lying to you because we like lies and we like hearing things, right, that make us feel good about ourselves, right, and hearing things that say great things about the politicians we already like and negative things about the politicians we dislike? And the answer is a bit of both here, right? But it helps us understand where it's coming from and whether we need to kind of look in a mirror and think about ourselves and our own, right, intentions and our own things when we're trying to understand this. Artificial intelligence, right, has generated a lot of press, a lot of people talking about it and being able to generate lies. And fundamentally, it doesn't change the incentives or the game or the structure of all of this. It's just much easier for everyone to generate lies, right? And more convincing and credible lies here, which creates a huge issue, particularly in the same era, right, as kind of declining trust in the news media, declining revenues for traditional media outlets, and a lot of places where we might get good information, right, is kind of muddled and harder to find, right, amidst all the noise we see. One of the big kind of central questions for talking about misinformation is, well, the lies are out there, they've been out there. Does it actually impact us? Does it actually change who we might vote for? Does it actually change our beliefs? And this is a really, really hard question to answer, partly because many of the tools we as social scientists more broadly have to study, right, how policies and other things, right, are here is we have ethical standards, believe it or not, right, in academia, and we can't lie to people. We don't want to lie to people. We don't want to misinform them in order to do this. And so it can be really, right, hard then to help us understand, right, the actual impact of what's going on here. Sorry, I believe the slides are out of order. So when we think about, right, how we might detect this information, right, and how we might study its actually impact, is it can be really hard because people get exposed to it, and we hope that it does not affect their beliefs, right? The actual information, the content that they have about the world. And studying beliefs is a really hard thing to do for two kind of reasons. The first is that beliefs, right, vary in certainty, is that people are often very, very worried about the impact of misinformation in elections, and by and large, a lot of good research shows that it rarely changes much in terms of who people are voting for. It may be that very strong Democrats and very strong Republicans believe lots of false things, but it's generally just false things that lead them to be very stubborn in that belief that already exists there. And we see very little evidence of people kind of in the middle of the distribution shifting much, if at all, because those are often the people most checked out, most tuned out, and not consuming this information. The other main reason why studying the impacts is really hard is that in order for me to know what you believe about politics or anything else, right, which I'm not asking you to tell me, but you're welcome to share, is that you have to tell me. And you might be lying to me, right? And I mean that not jokingly, as not like lies about lies, but in a particular setting or a particular place, people may not be willing to admit what they truly believe because of social pressure. But also importantly, in studying conspiracy theories and misinformation and other things, it's really hard to know whether someone actually believes whatever the wild thing they say is, or whether they're just saying it because it feels good to say negative things about a politician you hate, right? Or it feels good to say positive things about a politician you like. And this leads to a really big problem in studying this, is we can see conspiracy theories and people, right, say misinformation, but we don't know that they actually truly deep down believe that and it's changing their preferences. We know very strongly that people just like saying negative things about people they don't like here. Real actual studies, so Andy Guess and some colleagues, right, from several institutions studied the impact, right, and whether misinformation was spreading in the 2016 election. And so they took many thousand people, surveyed them throughout the campaign, got access with their permission to their Facebook profiles and looked at who actually saw and shared misinformation and engaged with it in the campaign. And depending on how big is big, right, the optimistic finding they have, and different studies have studied this in 2020 in different elections, is that the vast majority of people don't encounter misinformation. Over 90% of their sample here didn't share it, right, or didn't engage with it. You can flip it on the coin and be like, well, almost 10% did then. That's also a little bit, right, pessimistic, depending on how you want to look at it, right, is most of the people that were engaging with it in this particular study in 2016 were more likely to share, were Republicans and independents, more likely to be conservative, and older people, older individuals here were more likely to engage with it. The thing about this, though, is we don't know why they shared it, right? Hey, look at this very funny lie that someone had, right, that's clearly obviously fake, or whether they truly believed it, right, and truly changed their beliefs. And for this reason, it can be really, really hard to get purchase on how big of a problem it is, even though in principle, obviously, we understand misinformation and lies are bad. So I want to turn to the main central thing that people want to talk about often, which is, well, what do we do given lies exist, given it's out there on the internet, right? How do we grapple with this? And given the First Amendment, right, in the United States, right, we have a very strong freedom of speech, right, unlike many other advanced democracies as well. The role in the government in preventing mis and disinformation out there is actually quite small, right, unfortunately. There's often very little they can do given the liberal interpretation of the First Amendment. So the first stepping stone then is, well, let's look to other institutions, as many, right, prominent journalistic sources have turned to basically taking on the role of fact-checking, right, a traditional news outlet. The trouble with fact-checking is that it often doesn't work, right, in large scale. Right, it often doesn't reach the right people, right? It reaches people like you who might be very concerned about misinformation, but not the people out there who are less concerned about it and may not be reading it or may not be subscribers. Often you have to write correct information for people, which requires people to trust the correction, right, and not the false information. And sometimes, right, this does not occur for very obvious reasons. It can occur, right, when you have trusted sources, but of course, right, everyone is very distrustful of the media. It also, and something that it comes up in campaigns occasionally, right? In order to tell someone that something's a lie, you need to say the lie and say that it is a lie. And so you see campaigns and candidates occasionally, right, play off of this. It's like, look, the New York Times said this. And it's like, yeah, they said it was wrong, right? It was false here. And in fact, it's not the original thing. You're missing a not there, and that can be a big problem. In terms of social media companies, right, and misinformation shared on their platforms, unfortunately, kind of given the amount of content, right, and lessons Facebook and others have learned, is it's really hard to scale up corrections, right, and stop this stuff from spreading. They've taken broad efforts, right, including like crowdsourced fact-checking and other things, but of course, then the crowd has to be correct, have the right incentives in flagging this, and it can be a real problem too when the incentives, right, to be engaged, right, are often not super aligned with cutting down on the spread of this information. The final thing then is, well, if the institutions, whether the news media is going to have a hard time grappling with it, right, or the government, is, well, what can we do about it? What can we do when we encounter misinformation and disinformation out there in the world, right? And this may sound a little bit ironic, but the first thing is actually you should be less informed. And what do I mean by that is, well, take your time, right? Often with our devices, with the internet, there's an incentive to always know what's going on this very minute in Washington, D.C. or around the world. And one of the first big and easy steps you can do is actually take a step back. Wait a little bit of time, right, for information to filter through proper sources. As the broadcaster Edward R. Murrow famously quoted back in the 1960s, right, a lie can go around the world while the truth is still getting its pants on, right, is it takes a little bit of time for the truth to break through, but it will break through eventually. And so actually disconnecting a little bit can be really, really helpful. The second thing, right, is often when we talk about the prevalence of social media is people are deeply concerned about only hearing stuff from people like them, right? And filter bubbles, or whatever term we might give to it, is that people hear only the information that already is aligned with their preferences. This is true. This is a big deal and a big problem. But one of the things to recognize on social media, right, is that it feeds off your engagement. And one of the big impacts we've seen and studied quite well in the past few decades is that one of the bigger impacts of social media is actually making us dislike other people more. Because what breaks through is not just the information from the people that you like and already share your beliefs, but the biggest caricature of the other side, right? The worst thing that you might ever want to see or encounter. And it can create this really negatively polarizing effect, right? And that you believe then that everyone on the other side, whatever it may be, is like that one worst example, right? And of course, they're shown the worst example from your side. The Andy Guest study I cited a little bit ago, right, noted that because most people don't counter misinformation, kind of the metaphor they use to describe the internet and misinformation is that, yeah, there's misinformation on the internet, but it's often confined to kind of bad neighborhoods, particular Facebook groups, particular platforms, particular websites, is that by and large, right, recognizing the sources that are putting it out or sharing it and cutting those links, right, those ties, whether it be formally blocking or muting, right, or leaving those groups can be really, really an important strategy to avoid contacting it. Back all the way to the 1940s, right, some good research in communication noting kind of thinking about the two-step flow of information in our society. So we often presume that everyone gets all the information they get about the happenings in the world directly from the news media, but by and large, that's often not true. Is that a huge amount of information is shared in this second step of you read the newspaper and then you tell your friend something, or that second step of sharing with a colleague or a friend. In that two-step flow, right, is where a lot of misinformation can get more easily shared by word of mouth. And so verifying, or at least, right, waiting and listening and thinking about the information before you share it with others, right, whether electronically or in person, is really important. When you talk about, right, social interactions, whether in person or on the internet, often, right, one of the big kind of lessons we can take from political persuasion research is it can be really, really hard to persuade people. It's really hard to change people's opinions. And in fact, right, if you tell someone they're wrong, if you tell someone that they should believe something else, often that's the most counterproductive thing you can do in conversation with them, because they'll put their back up and they won't want to be corrected or resist that information. And if you want to persuade someone, right, the best way to convince someone of something is to lead them to the correct answer without telling them the correct answer and letting them come to realize it on their own. And so in interactions with others, digitally or in person, right, expressing doubt, asking questions, not like you have to ask questions like you're examining them like you're a lawyer, right, and they're on the stand or anything, but just asking subtle questions, asking why, explain, right, information you may encounter, you may not believe, can be really helpful in creating doubt among someone that believes these things that may be false already. This quote in Cyrillic here, right, is a Russian proverb that was Ronald Reagan was very fond of in nuclear arms negotiations in the 1980s, which is importantly, right, it translates to trust but verify. This idea that you should still trust in information and sources you encounter, that you should not just pull away, right, and not believe anything you see out there, but you should take that additional step of you should believe other people, but you should verify what they're saying. You should verify the information that they encounter. And the lesson is not, right, to disbelieve everything. And the final kind of big takeaway point is that lots of scholars in thinking about democracies and non-democracies and how we operate within them and how, right, our government functions and why it functions the way we do, is that while rules and laws exist and matter, is that we rely on norms, expectations for behavior from others to not lie to us, to not do things, right? And how are norms enforced? Well, norms are enforced, right, by, in fact, right, listening to liars when they lie to you, right? Or not positively reinforcing behaviors that are, right, negative out there. And that without these norms, right, democracy can have major, major problems, but they require us to take action, to listen, and to think critically, right, about what's going on here. So I want to leave plenty of time for questions. I hope some of this is quite informative, and hopefully, in fact, instead of being the misinformation machine at the beginning, in fact, here's the reverse of it. I dropped the miss, right, is that hopefully, in fact, right, this is me up here today sharing some information about misinformation and how to avoid it. And I'm happy to take questions from anyone about anything if you'd like. Sure.
Just with what's happened with Alex Jones and all that, like, what threshold has to be crossed for someone to be able to sue someone for misinformation? Can you repeat the question?
Sure, absolutely. So it was mentioned Alex Jones, right, who's been sued into oblivion because of, right, his many lies about Sandy Hook and other things. And so the question is, what can be done about that? What's the threshold for holding someone liable here? And generally speaking, right, holding someone liable for defamation in the United States is is hard, not as hard as it is, right, in some other advanced democracies here. But in fact, right, if you're attacking public figures, if it lies about public figures, then the threshold is actually much, much, much higher. It's much harder to, right, hold someone liable. Part of the reason why he, right, has lost many of these cases is because he was lying about private citizens, families, right, who lost their children in school shootings. And so it's a much easier case to prove there. Generally speaking, although not wholly, right, there are kind of exceptions for information about politicians, about candidates, right, about public figures here. And so it can be really, really hard to show this. It has to be shown, right, that you're basically doing it with malice, right, that you know the information is false, which can be really hard because people will just lie and say they truly believed it, right, and thought of that. And so it can be really, really hard to hold people accountable via those means. The legal system does provide important protections, right, for you and me and private citizens and people not necessarily much more highly in the public eye. But unfortunately, right, in campaigns, in politicians, the legal protections there, that avenue in shutting this down is really not a particularly viable option. Yes.
Has your research shown that misinformation coming from higher ranked people is more likely to be believed than information coming from an anonymous source or someone that no one's ever heard of?
Sure, absolutely. So the question is about, right, whether misinformation from politicians or higher up sources, right, is more believable than kind of more anonymous comments and others. And absolutely, right, so source credibility is a big factor in terms of whether people believe misinformation or not. This has been the subject of a ton of political science research dating to the 1930s even, and thinking about traditional media outlets and how people consume this information. Is that this is why, right, some of these efforts to legitimize misinformation, whether by creating kind of fake news platforms, right, there's a recent book written about what's so-called pink slime journalism, right, where you basically take real news and repackage it in many ways. This is extremely common nowadays, right? I've found myself quoted in random newspapers that aren't real, that don't exist, that take a real comment I gave to the media and put it in there and repackage it. And trying to make it look legitimate is, right, a real big issue here. Or politicians who lie, politicians who engage in misinformation and disinformation can legitimize it in many people's minds because they expect to trust that person because they voted for that person. And this is a real issue. You know, I mentioned kind of relying upon norms here is, for a long time, right, there is, whether hard enforced very much or not, right, an expectation that politicians should not just say things that are demonstrably untrue, right? And in fact, right, the fact that people have and not necessarily been called on that as much, right, is a real issue in breaking down and kind of opening the floodgates for others to try that same strategy. And not just in telling lies, but in creating doubt about the real information out there by, right, just kind of spamming everyone with enough disinformation or misinformation that people just simply don't believe anything they hear from traditional news media outlets. Yes, in the back.
Is it too late to legislate truth in media? Is it too late? Because we used to have standards 20 years ago.
Sure.
You couldn't just say bullshit on TV without paying a price. And then they deregulated the whole industry, and it's crazy now.
Absolutely. So,
Is it too late to regulate?
sure. So the question is it too late to regulate, right, the news media, right, to truth in journalism or other things here? So there's a couple big changes. The first is that a lot of the FCC regulation, right, of broadcasting standards applied to broadcasters, right? So broadcast TV, broadcast radio, because those are kind of a public good, and the logic idea here is that there's only so many bandwidths you can broadcast radio or television, and so because of that collective issue is the government can regulate it. The trouble is with the internet, with cable TV, even prior to it, is now suddenly there's an open market for this. And so the FCC has never had, right, the ability to regulate, right, sources on the internet or these other things here. And so that opened the door, right, for all of this. Broadly speaking, right, the kind of very simple pessimistic answer to your question is it is too late, right? It's very much too late and it's not going to happen given the First Amendment. That said, right, there are efforts, right, that people can make, right, particularly we've seen post-2016 Google and others, right, using their power, the fact that they're dominant in kind of the tech sphere and generate tons of advertising revenue for lots of websites and lots of other news organizations, is kind of cutting out the revenue, cutting out the advertising revenue to sites that peddle misinformation and lies and other things. And so approaches via those means are generally possible, and we've seen a lot of effort and a lot of lobbying go on to try to do this. The other broader thing is on social media. And you may have heard discussions of this in the news media about Section 230, right, of Communications Code in 1996. The basic idea is on social media sites, if you go post lies, they're not liable for your lies. You may be, right? But in fact, they allow that platform, or that on the platform, because regulating what every single person says on a social media site is almost impossible for these sites to do. There are discussions, right, of getting rid of this, which would just lead to kind of almost the opposite effect of some of the political actors, right, discussing here, is that if this act were not there, in fact, social media sites would be incredibly draconian about what you're allowed to post, right, and curtail basically a massive amount of speech, even factual speech, right, just because of restrictions to try to do that and curtail it. So there's action that can be taken by private actors, news media, social media companies, but by and large, right, given kind of the advent of the internet and cable TV before it, legislating, right, some of this is almost impossible. And to the definitional point at the beginning too is like, it can be very easy to like see what a very bald-faced lie, but at what level does information have to rise to of misleading, right, before we might take action about it? Is there's often a very blurry line there, and there's often the temptation, right, given our own politics, to draw that line elsewhere for someone else, and very liberally for one's own information. I saw it in the middle.
So I just wondered, we've talked a lot about the internet and all of those, but I have a concern about local newspapers going away, and I always saw them as a kind of balance about what you get from a universal to down to your communities. And I just wonder if you see any correlation there for misinformation and taking care of some fact checking.
Absolutely. So the question is about local newspapers and their decline, right, and kind of often touted as a very good source of information. It's absolutely correct, right, is the decline of local newspapers kind of is not, right, coincidentally, right, coincided with the massive amount of misinformation rising, is that having well-funded local journalism is often a bulwark against this. And in fact, even though, right, we see very acutely seeing a lot of these newspapers and sources disappear in recent years, consolidation happening in the past half century, right, has helped create kind of the issue in the vacuum here. A massive amount of local newspapers, even if they still exist today, right, is for better or for worse, right, packaging content from national, right, groups like Gannett and others, and potentially adding a little bit of a local angle there. But that consolidation is incredibly problematic here, partly just not in and of itself, but partly because it coincides with this ability, right, of others to repackage and peddle misinformation. Also, it's very easy, right, to set up a website and make a new local newspaper, and many have done very good citizen journalism doing this, and many have also done very poor, right, lying using the same exact mechanism. And so it can be really hard and muddy the waters about what true good local journalism looks like. Yes?
You mentioned earlier about supply side and demand side. So I'm interested in the demand side. Can you talk about our inherent biases that contribute to that demand side? Like, Goggin said, if you say something often enough, people will believe it, right? So can you talk about how we're part of the problem with our inherent biases?
Absolutely. So this is a huge topic of my study. So thinking about that demand side, right, of this. So supply side, right, misinformation being they're supplying it because they want to lie to you, because they want to influence you. Demand side is we like consuming this content because we like being lied to, right? Or we like, right, engaging with this. This is a huge factor, right? It's part of the reason we've seen kind of massive segmentation in the market, right? And particularly in discussions of media bias, right? Why people consume MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or other things, is the rise of kind of cable news allowed for platforms that very much cater in some small ways and larger ways to particular people's political inclinations to make their revenue. Is given, right, the business of news media, right, different in the US than many other countries, is so privatized, right, that is in many other countries, right, you have a BBC or a public broadcaster. Obviously we have NPR and PBS in the US, but not super well funded and also not a huge share of the market. is because it's privatized, is news media is always in the business of making money, right? Whether through subscriptions, whether ad revenue, clicks, right, all this, they want you there, and they want you there all day long in front of the TV or reading that content. And that incentivizes really bad behavior on our part and bad behavior on their part, because it means that people will, right, want content that tells them that they're right and that the other side is bad and wrong, right, in this. And so we see massive market share go to, right, these news media corporations do it. And this is often, right, kind of a really important point that when talking to students or discussing this stuff is, you know, when you think about a lot of the ills in the news media, is while you shouldn't fully just go look in the mirror and blame yourself, you should think about this yourself as well, is that why are you clicking on, right, the stories that have engaging headlines or tell you what you want to hear? Is maybe don't, right? Is you're feeding the machine that makes them realize they can make money through these means by doing this. And so taking a step back, right, and in this, it can be a really important step there. Separating these is obviously hard, but the demand side is impossible to ignore, right? It was less of an issue when, you know, you had a few broadcast news media sources on the air, because even though they may be competing with each other, there were strong norms and FCC regulation and other things. But particularly given the floodgates have been opened with the internet and cable news before it, of course, it's a huge issue.
Maybe one or two more questions.
Sure, in the center.
I recently read a book, I think it's called Generations, and it's very interesting, very data-driven. So one of the things I got out of it is how different each generation deals with information in politics, especially. So now I'm also an active volunteer campaign. So what are we doing now is we're seeing the difference. For example, we're dealing with the messaging that goes through the normal printed form, and then text messages for younger people. That requires a different technology, but it's important to understand that the generational difference is huge in how people receive information. And sadly, I think for younger generations, they're tuned out, and that's part of the reason. So when we're doing campaigning, we have to see, we're not going to reach those people just by doing a traditional canvassing. They ain't home. They're not going to be home. We've got to find another means to do it. So it's very strategic.
Absolutely. So the question about generational differences and consuming messaging and media content and other things, it's absolutely true. You know, one of the biggest things you mentioned kind of at the end of the question here is when we see, right, cable news on the rise, and there's a great book written by Marcus Pryor on the matter of how this, right, feeds into polarization. One of the biggest things is not, right, the impact of Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or these other things in kind of getting people who are already going to vote a particular way, lots of information to bolster those beliefs in that, is that suddenly a lot of people could just tune out, right? You used to be able to turn on the TV, right, and you had a few news sources. Now, a lot of people, right, with cable news then and the internet even more so, is a lot of people just go watch sports or watch reality TV or watch other things here, which aren't inherently problematic in themselves, but people have the ability, right, to kind of have this missing middle of a lot of people have tuned out of politics, right, and kind of so what's left are the angry, loud voices on each side. But in fact, right, people are harder to reach, right, via these messages and other things. I would say, right, you know, I would push back very mildly on kind of the generational point slightly, is that basically we've seen this story recur in the academic literature, is, you know, people writing in the 1940s about how, like, radio is going to doom us all because now it's completely changed the way politics is done. We see this with broadcast TV in the 60s and 70s. We see it with cable. And of course, there are technological changes that have created divides in generations and consumption of content. But a lot of the first principles of how this works is that the media is there to create content that gets engagement and makes money, is the same incentive over and over and over again. And so while the internet may be very different and it kind of opened the floodgates for a variety of sources, just because anyone can post lies or real information on the internet doesn't mean people are clicking on it and engaging it, right? And a lot of the kind of economic principles that drive this are the same as they were years ago.
Last question.
Sure, over here.
Oh.
Or
I had my hand up.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah.
I just am not in your view. Regarding, you know, thinking of the Taxpayer Deception Act and ballot measures and how, I don't know if this is in your scope, but, you know, how words are used to kind of sway us to think something different than what is actually the impact of the ballot. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah. So the question is about wording of ballot measures, about the words, the language used to describe this. And, you know, this evokes, right, a really interesting point, and I think a very important one, and particularly appropriate one to kind of end some of the conversation on. I'm happy to stick around and talk with those of you who had their hands up too after, is that, you know, understanding what lies are is really easy, right? But understanding what the truth is really hard, because every way we use language has a frame to it. It has a particular lens to it. And while it may be technically accurate, it might be playing up one aspect of something and diminishing another, right, in the language that we use. And that when you talk about media bias or bias in information, there is no objective thing in the world. We could make a very deep philosophical point if we wanted here, is that in order to tell someone about something, you're providing a lens and a frame to it that may be more or less honest, depending on what you're trying to do. And that so actually wording something neutrally is often impossible. And we often default then to either both sides or all sides as like, here's an argument for, here's an argument against, right? Or right, a pro and a con. And in doing these things, and it's, unfortunately, sometimes that can also be misleading. If there's 8 million pros and one negative thing, right, for this thing, is putting those on equal footing can also be a problem there. And so whether it be ballot measures or in political advertising more generally, or what we consume on the internet, is understanding kind of what is objectively true is often really hard, because you might write a news story differently than I would, and your version is also entirely correct, and mine's also entirely correct. But the frame, right, what we discuss when we're talking about it, whether we're talking about, particular foreign affairs things in terms of a humanitarian crisis or diplomatic, right, things, or in terms of war and conflict, right? And we can talk about the same event in very, very different ways, in which can color people's perceptions of it. And unfortunately, right, all of them are right. They're maybe not dishonest, but it's just a very different way of grappling with that same issue. And that's the whole world of politics, right, is trying to convince people that your way is the best way, whether through fair and right tactics or through misinformation. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Lots of food for thought. Thank you for those great questions, and thank you, Professor Goggin. Here it is. I have a little something for you, some appreciation from the legal women. Thank you so much. Okay. We are on schedule. I want to thank Mona Pastor, who's the last person to serve herself. She's our events chair, and she's the one. Yes, round of applause for Mona. Yes, she's the one who has worked so hard and paid attention to every last detail, and she's responsible for feeding you this afternoon. Thank you, Mona, and your team. I know there were many others involved. A couple of housekeeping items. There were sign-up sheets, and I hope everyone did sign-in sheets when you came to the meeting. If you didn't sign in, could you raise your hand? So a couple of people there, because we need to have everybody's name. And you should have received a bingo card. I hope you have been taking a look at it and trying to get a bingo. I hope we have a bingo winner or two before the end of the day. You just need to cross out all the things on that bingo card that apply to you. Want you to hold on to that bingo card even if you don't win bingo today, and let me tell you why. On that card are reminders of the ways that you can get involved with our league. You can keep crossing out the squares after today, throughout the year, and when you get a bingo, come to another meeting and we'll probably have a prize for you. So today's not the last day to earn that bingo. And finally, on the back of the card, we have all of the ways that you can stay connected with League, our social media addresses and all sorts of things, email addresses, so it's a good card to hang on to. So I often start our meetings with an opening thought, a quote that allows a moment of reflection on our purpose and helps to set the tone for the meeting. This afternoon actually, I'm quoting Alice Paul, who I quoted at our January meeting, thanks to Suzanne Carnero. I know she's here, a favorite of Suzanne's. She was one of the foremost strategists and leaders of the suffragist movement, an impressive woman of her time and of any time. In 1913, she organized and led the largest protest march, 8,000 women marching at the Capitol to demand voting rights. So if you've ever participated in a march, you're following in Alice Paul's footsteps. She said, talking about that movement, the suffragist movement, each one of us puts in one little stone and you get a great mosaic at the end. So what struck me about this, about her words, was that it is a beautiful picture. I have a mosaic here. And there are many, many little stones. And each one little stone doesn't really call much attention to itself. Each one is little and might seem insignificant. But if that's what you thought, I would have to tell you that you are wrong. Because if one of those stones was missing, you would notice its absence. And that's the message I gleaned, and one that I think applies to our league and each of you. We, you, all contribute in ways that may seem insignificant or not noticed, but if you weren't here, if you weren't doing the things that you're doing, we would notice your absence. So I'd like to take a minute now to acknowledge 3 members whose contribution to the league, their stones if you will, are not obvious, not in the foreground, not big and flashy, but what they do is essential and meaningful, not only to our league, but have been to me in my last 2 years. So I know you're eating, but I'd like to call up 3 people: Karen Sutton, Susan Connell, and Ann Olmstead. Sorry for interrupting your lunch. As they made their way up. Come on up. We need you on camera. So Karen has served on the board. She's been our voter service chair. She's served as a legislative analyst for the state. She was president of our league. It was her shoes that I stepped into 2 years ago. She is meticulous and diligent and reliable, so reliable. She's been doing so many things behind the scenes you would not know. She maintains our membership database. She supported our treasurer. She monitors our compliance. She's taken on website duties at a time when this was not that easy for her. She's been steady and wise counsel to me. She does it all quietly behind the scenes, and I just want to acknowledge that and make sure you all know how big her contribution is. So thank you, Karen. I have something for them, but we're going to keep going. Susan, come on over on camera. Her official title is webmaster, but she does so much more. She handles our press releases, she creates graphics and flyers, our print materials, she posts on social media, she maintains our YouTube channel, she manages our Google Workspace, our league email accounts, and I'm sure there's more. I will be looking on our website. I will be checking out a YouTube video that's been posted, and I will notice some little details, some just beautiful, and I'll think, oh my gosh, Susan did that. I will send her an email and say, Susan, would you mind please doing this? And she'll write me back and say, oh, did I do the wrong one? Because she's already done it. She has she does it all beautifully and professionally, and she does this while still working. She has actually paying clients. So, on behalf of our league and on behalf of me, I just want to thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done.
And Anne, finally Anne. She may not be the perfect testament to this teeny tiny stone mosaic we're talking about, because we kind of all know Anne. She's a pretty noticeable stone. Past president, chair of the water committee, past candidate forums chair, state water interest group chair, still maybe on that, but many, 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 many things. She writes reports, she gets everything in on time, and does so much behind the scenes. And importantly, at least for me, she's been an incredible sounding board for me, an incredible listening ear. I couldn't have done it without your help, Anne. So she's always the first person to come to me and say, Rosette, we need to acknowledge this person this year. We need to be sure we do this. And so I want to turn the tables on you, Anne.
You fooled me.
And acknowledge you for all your contributions to the league. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I give you a thank you very much, Rosette. I'm sitting there thinking,
Okay. So there are many, many, many others who we should all acknowledge, who I could acknowledge, but we have business to conduct. So I do want to say, though, thank you all. I appreciate you all. We, the board members, on behalf of the board, appreciate all that you do. We know what you're doing, and thank you. So with that, I'll call the business meeting to order. We'll start with the credentials report. Marianne, this is when we have to ensure that we have a quorum, 10% of our membership, that allows us to conduct business. Marianne, it's right here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marianne Clancy. I'm the secretary. So our bylaws require that 10% of our membership be present in order to reach quorum. As of January 31st this year, 2024, we had 192 members, so we require 19 members. We've asked about everyone who's registered. We actually have 59 attendees here today. Thank you. I'm just curious. I'd like to know how many of you are guests. If you're a guest, will you raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I counted 6. Okay, anyway, perfect. I didn't miss anyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for joining us today. I hope that you are inspired by our league and our mission, and that you decide to get involved. We definitely have the quorum that we need of 19, so we're good to go.
Great. Thank you, Marianne. Our next order of business is to appoint the committee to approve the minutes of the 2024 annual meeting. Members, we are a membership-driven organization, so members review the minutes. Our secretary will draft them. And so we have 4 volunteers. Thank you very much. Christine Dickin of Carlsbad, Wendy Piero of San Marcos, Nancy Sublette, Oceanside, and Belinda Smith, our member at large, will be reviewing the minutes, and they will be available online in a month or so. And now I'd like to introduce our parliamentarian. You've just met Marianne Clancy, our secretary. Chris Harris is our parliamentarian, and she's going to go over meeting rules.
I'm sure all of you read the rules in your packet, right? Right.
Chris,
Absolutely.
I think you need to come around here.
Oh, so that it can be on camera. Do I need this? Do I need this? Yes. Oh, come on. Okay. But here's a brief summary of the rules. Ready? You have to be a member to vote. Thank you, visitors, for coming, but you may not vote. Our votes will be by voice. Okay. If you want to be recognized by the president, you should raise your hand. We already did that with Dr. Goggins who's speaking, we know how to do that, right? You will have 2 minutes to speak. No one will interrupt you because that's not the people we are. Okay? If we run short of time, if you go over, I have the discretion of cutting you off. Other than that, we all know how to do this, right? Okay.
Thank you, Chris. So the first action item is to adopt the order of business. There you see it on the screen. I need a motion to adopt the order of business. Marianne moves and Vanessa seconds. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the vote. All in favor of adopting this order of business, raise your hand, please. Or say aye. Yeah. Oh, that's right. We're doing voice vote. Sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Moving on, I'll give you a brief president's report. Let me see. Oh, I'm just going to speak. Okay. So I just have this here because it's a nice group photo. It's our program planning meeting that we held. It was a joint meeting with San Diego back in February when we were discussing priority issues to recommend to National League. This is the year that the National League reviews and adopts priority issues for the next 2 years. And 3 of us will be going to the National Convention. Marianne and I and Jenny Hallner, who you'll meet later, will be attending the National Convention. So I think it's important to remind everybody about what our priority issues are, and these are the ones that emanate from the national level. We have our own local priority issues as well, and I'll show those to you in a moment. So these were the priority issues for 2022-24. They are recommended for continuation, and the banner priority issue for the League of Women Voters is something called the Making Democracy Work campaign. And the specific sort of issues for emphasis under that are protecting voting rights, improving elections, reducing money's political influence, fighting for fair redistricting, and what the League calls its moonshot goal, abolishing the Electoral College. Other issues include healthcare reform, the environment, and immigration. So the recommendation for now, and it'll be voted on at the convention at the end of June, is to continue with these same priority issues. You should know that our league recommended to National that they include as an issue for emphasis mis- and disinformation in politics, which is why we have Professor Goggin here today, because it's an important issue to our league. These are our local priority issues, and they very much are an extension of or in alignment with the national priority issues. The state also has priority issues. I'm just not covering them today, but they're very, very similar. They all echo each other. So our Making Democracy Work campaign, we've been trying to focus on our Observer Corps. We need to rebuild our Observer Corps. It's an important part of the work that we do. We observe as many local jurisdictions as we can to make sure that they are operating transparently, openly, and that's good government that's taking place here. Voter service, everything from voter registration, voter education, our pros and cons presentations, candidate forums, that's a big focus for us. And then we've also been very interested in focusing on money in politics. Housing and homelessness is another priority issue, and we have a committee devoted to that. They're doing a lot of good work. We've written a lot of letters, and we've done a lot of advocating on those issues here locally. And then climate and sustainability with an emphasis on water. And we have a climate interest group and a water interest group. Any questions? So here's the highlight reel that I'm really proud to share with you. In this past year, we finally launched a youth voter initiative. We had our first event in October at a high school in San Marcos. And since then, we have had a number of events at Cal State San Marcos, at Miracosta, and many other high schools in North County. We reached over 1,400 students and registered nearly 500 registered or pre-registered students. We're really excited about that. If you saw our newsletter, I had a shout out to Jill Cooper and Carol Jenkins, who could not be here today, neither one of them, but they were really instrumental in getting us off the ground. Really, really thrilled about that. And we've had a lot of interest and enthusiasm, and it's great to see. And then I just wanted to shout out Mandy Butler, who's our pros and cons chair. We did pros and cons. We did a lot of pros and cons, and generated a lot of interest in the March primary election. And Mandy did a video of our Prop A pros and cons presentation that hit over 11,000 views on our YouTube channel. We've never gotten anything like that before. So I expect we're going to have a lot of traffic in the fall election. Events, we had a number of great events. And again, Mona stepped up as events chair in January, but she was already doing a lot with events before then. We had County League Day focused on housing and homelessness because it's one of our priority areas. We had a fundraiser in March, and if you weren't there, you missed a really fun time and a really educational time. We learned about ranked choice voting, and we met our fundraising goals to help fund our election season activities in November. We had a Money in Politics webinar that was very well attended, and we had 2 outstanding speakers, experts in the field. That webinar was in April, again, because money in politics is one of our issues of emphasis. And then we had an Observer Corps meeting in May, one of our best attended, although you all outdid them. We just had an Observer Corps meeting in May, a really, really wonderful, informative meeting where our observers reported on the work that they're doing. Happy to report on membership that we finally, again, exceeded the 200 member threshold. We've been, the pandemic affected us as it did everyone, and it's been a little bit of a slow return from the pandemic, but I think we're there, and proud to report that we're over 209 and new members coming in all the time. So, and for those, who is a new member like since January 2024, raise your hand. Yay. Thank you, and welcome. And then our recognition. I just want to, we should pat ourselves on the back. We were chosen by Senator Blakespear to be the nonprofit that she wanted to sort of feature and recognize at a Women in Leadership event that she had in last July, which was the very beginning of our fiscal year. And then we just recently in May got nominated by Cal State San Marcos for a Community Service Partner Award. We didn't win the award, but we got nominated, and I think that's great. So wanted to share that with you. So preview of the upcoming year, we're looking at having some sort of an election season kickoff where we'll be talking about, at that point we'll have a really good sense of all of the events that we're going to be doing, all the pros and cons that we're going to be doing, the candidate forums that maybe have been scheduled. We don't have a date yet. September 5th, which is a Thursday, it would be in the evening, or September 7th, it would be a Saturday morning. Just want to quickly poll the people in the room. Who would prefer a Thursday evening meeting? Raise your hand. Good to know. Mona, are you paying attention? Okay. You might want to mark your calendar for September 7th. At around 10 or 10:30 in the morning. And then we have already scheduled a general member meeting on October 5th. That is a Saturday. That is a morning. Mandy, we got that right. It will be a general member meeting at which we will do a pros and cons for our membership. It will also be open for the public. And for those of you who are new, our pros and cons presentations are where we present all the ballot measures that you will see on your ballot, and we break it down for you in plain English. We make it clear what the pros are, what the cons are, who is supporting, who is spending money for and against, and then hopefully that gives you the information that you need to make an informed decision when you go to vote. Candidate forums will be taking place in September and October, and then voter registration, we'll be doing some. I know that a youth voters initiative has already got a couple planned throughout the summer, but August and September, we'll be doing a lot of outreach there. And I mention these because these are places where you might want to get involved. And what I want you to know is that you can get involved one time. You can sign up to just do one event, or you can do them all. It's up to you.
Some days we come away with no registers whatsoever for a whole day of sitting there in the street.
Yes, thank you. So she's was noting that when we have voter tabling events, we call them tabling events, that we're not really registering that many voters. A, because you're automatically registered when you get a California driver's license. B, you can register online. And so California happens to be a state that's very friendly to voters. So it's true, and we've had that experience as well. But we still like to show up at some key events, just so people know we're in the community, just to raise our profile in the community. And we can also hand out information about voting. We have Vote 411 cards. We can direct people to nonpartisan, objective, accurate information about voting. So that's another reason to be there. So other events, we are working on an event with Rachel Locke and Carl Luna. We don't know if it's going to happen. We hosted this public forum for them last year. They're doing research on threats to public officials. They did a bunch of research that they reported on. It was a great event. We do roundtable discussions with people. They've done further research, and they want to present their latest findings. We're just trying to see if we can put something together, maybe late July, early August. So stay tuned. We're planning a volunteer and holiday social, sort of we will, trust me, many of us are going to be really tired after the election, working really hard on all kinds of things. So we're going to convene and have a good time. December 2nd or 3rd, it will be a lunch to be determined. And then we already know that we're going to have a league event at North Coast Repertory Theater, What the Constitution Means to Me, which is a great play. I've actually already seen it. It's a one-woman play by Heidi Schreck, is going to be put on at the North Coast Repertory Theater, and we have already made arrangements to go as a group on March 23rd. Is it a matinee, Mona?
Yeah, 2 p.m. matinee. We thought we'd gather at 1 for some refreshments and socializing. So buy your tickets from us. Don't go to the
Yes.
theater to buy them.
We will be selling group sale tickets through our website once it's several months away. So, but we'll have a little socializing at 1 o'clock, and the play starts at 2. March 23rd. Mark your calendars. And then finally, here are the ways you can get involved. These are just a few. There are many, many others. But again, our voter service includes pros and cons. And Mandy Butler, if you'd raise your hand, she's here. You can speak with her about what that might involve. Also, on your tables are volunteer sign-up sheets. So you can, it has a place for you to write your name, your email, phone number if you care, and then the area that you're interested in. So, and you know what? Put your name down. You're not, trust me, you're not committing to anything. Maybe you're just asking for information. So don't be afraid to fill out, to put your name down on that volunteer form. Candidate forums, sad to say that we don't have a candidate forums chair. And it would be nice to have two, because the job is, there's a lot of sort of admin work that needs to be done, emails that need to be sent out, memorandum of understandings with our communities. Usually we have a community sponsor that co-hosts the event with us. And then there's the actual candidate forum, moderator, timekeepers, question sorters. So there's a lot of things to do there. And if that all appeals to you, and again, you can just sign up to do one. Please write your name down for candidate forums. Voter outreach, this is the tabling events that we do out in the community. It won't be a whole lot. And again, you could just go to one. Our youth voter initiative, we have a big group of people who have volunteered for that, but we could always use more. And Vote 411, which is our online ballot tool. That's a very easy thing to do. You do it at home, on your own schedule. It's making sure that the information that is on Vote 411 for the local ballot measures and candidates is accurate and thorough. So hope there's something there that piques your interest. Events, Mona can always use help on events. And if you like to plan events or, have ideas about things that we could do at the league that would interest our members, talk to Mona, or again, write your name down. We have a new membership chair. You'll see we're gonna. Too late, Chris. Your name's already on the slate. Chris Harris.
Misinformation.
If you like, meeting new people and helping grow and sustain our membership, talk to Chris Harris. And communications, many things in communications. You see the list there. Talk to Marion. And hot off the press, we added this slide yesterday. The National League has developed what they're calling a civic listening corps, very related to what we talked about today, a volunteer network of individuals trained to monitor for and critically evaluate misinformation. It's a partnership between the League of Women Voters and the Algorithmic Transparency Institute. There's a QR code there that if you point your phone at it, it will link you to the website where you can get more information or even sign up and get training. But if you're interested at all in monitoring for mis and disinformation, this might be the thing for you. And I'll hang here for just a minute in case anybody wants to scan the QR code.
That's online?
Yes, it will take, yes, you can probably Google Civic Listening Corps. You can send me an email, you can put your name on that volunteer list and just say, I'm interested in the Civic Listening Corps, and we'll send you the information. Okay? And I'm done with my president's report. Any questions before we move on? Great. So Ginny? Oh, yes, Vanessa.
I just wondered in terms of the candidate forums.
Yes.
Who did you work with before? What other org? Because I know the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, many organizations. If you don't mind, because I want to make sure we stay. Let's talk about that offline. But it's a good question, Vanessa. Thank you. Ginny, you're up.
I'm not comfortable public speaking, but I want to make all of you comfortable when you look at the financial statements that you understand. That you understand what they mean. And I'm limited in time, so if you have questions, you can email me at treasurer@lwvncsd.org, and I'd be happy to answer anything. So I'm going to go over it quickly. The first statement is the statement of financial position, and it shows that the balance at June 30th was $62,000. The balance at May 15th was around $60,000. So there's about a $2,000 difference, which this is as of May 15th, so we'll probably make up for it, if people want to contribute to the lunch, by June 30th. So, let's see, do we need to do a motion? We need to do a motion to accept, again, this is an interim report. It's as of May 15th, and our year end is June 30th. So, but I guess we need to accept it. So, do I have a motion to approve the financial statement as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Carol. Second? Yep, second? Gary, thank you, Gary. Is there any clarifying questions or discussion? Yes, dear?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I see you have a big jump in money for the proposed budget to voter service. We're not discussing the budget yet.
That's going to be discussed after we vote on the financial position. So that's the next area of a discussion.
Okay, I have my two questions till then.
Okay? So, shall we call for the question? Is there a motion to adopt the state?
All in favor?
All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? No. Okay. So that's great. Okay, so the next slide. This is where the budget is. So the first column is the actual through May 15th. The second column is the budget that was passed last year. And the third column is the proposed budget for the upcoming year. So we're pretty much right on target as we were last year. Total revenue through May 15th is $21,000, which exceeds our budget of $20,000. Expenditures is pretty much the same at $22,600 versus $22,300. So anyway, that's the current year, the budget, and are we going to discuss the proposed budget now?
Do you want to, I would scroll through the next couple of slides. That
Okay.
is, yeah, yes,
Okay.
there you go.
Okay, so for those of you that read graphs, I'm an accountant, I like numbers, so, but it's pretty much the same across. You can see the revenue is pretty much the same, expenditures pretty much the same, except for the proposed budget for next year. And that's where your question is. So let me just explain where we got there. So we had a budget committee meeting, which was made up of Marianne was the chair, and Doreen, where are you, Doreen? Doreen was on it, and I forget who else. But anyway, we decided that this is such a crucial year that we wanted to allocate more funds to voter service. And so we decided to take $10,000 out of our savings account, which if you have any questions on how much is in there, you can look at the statement of financial position, which has all the bank account numbers. So that's primarily, it's voter service, and then there's a few events that's, over a couple $1,000s, but the bulk is in voter service.
Show the next slide, it shows the breakdown.
Thank you. Oh, there's the breakdown.
So I would ask for the motion first.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed budget?
I make that motion to
Okay,
approve the proposed
thank you.
budget.
And you have a second over here, Susie Jablinski.
Susie, thank you. Now there's discussion. You wanted to talk about something? Yeah?
Yeah,
Can you tell me your name, please?
Kathy Green.
Kathy Green.
It's quite a jump for voter service, and I was wondering if you could specify where you think that money, a few specifics about where you think we're gonna use that money this year.
We had a whole list of things that we're doing. Kathy, I will send you an email.
Well, I think everybody would like to.
Okay.
Kathy, let me, so what is being proposed is that we allocate $10,000 for voter service. It's actually not $10,000 for voter service. It's a little bit less than that, but all told that we invest $10,000 from our savings. We're not transferring any money. We're just making that money available to provide that flexibility to our voter service team. So one of the things that we might do, and this would be decided upon by the voter service team, depending on what their needs are, what they identify as their needs, and then approved by the board. But for example, we might invest in equipment so that we could have hybrid meetings for our candidate forums or some of our pros and cons, so that people could stream the meeting and attend it live. So that's one of the things that we might do. It would make it, the whole goal is to expand our footprint, have a bigger impact, make sure that the things we're doing get to the people who need it with regards to voter service. So that's one of the ways. The other way is that we are now currently videotaping all of our meetings and putting them on our website. And as I told you, our pros and cons got viewed over 11,000 times. So we would videotape our candidate forums, many of our events. So that's an additional expense. That's something we haven't been doing. It's something we started doing this year, and it helps to explain a little bit of the deficit, if you will, between revenue and expenses. But the specific programs within voter service will be decided by the teams who are leading those activities. Does that help, Kathy?
Yes, it's nice.
And it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to spend that money. We're recommending, the board is recommending to the membership that we allow that latitude and allow that flexibility, because the budget committee, thinking about this election, did not want to handcuff our league and make sure that they wanted to make sure that we were able to do the things that we thought might be necessary in such an important election year.
Thank you. Let's see.
Oh, you have another question?
Oh, yes?
If there's no more questions, I call for the question.
What is your name, please?
Renee Tarver.
Thank you, Renee. I appreciate that more than you know.
Oh, we have another question.
Oh, yeah?
I just have one
Kathy?
more.
Yeah.
You have a transfer of money from the ILO on your account. Do you have a specific use for that?
Yes.
Never mind.
So, do you want to explain the ILO? No, I'll explain the ILO funds. Okay. So you've been a member of the league for a long time, right? So you know the whole thing with the ILO. We can use 10% of the balance in the current fiscal year, and so, but it needs to be designated to increase the visibility of the league, and so yes, we do have specific events, but that's just part of the budget. So that dollar amount is 10%. We used 10% last year, and that was part of the fundraising, covered the cost of the fundraising, and it clearly elevated the league in the community. So
you would use it for something like that?
yes, it's specified what we can use it for, and I think we're going to have no limitations on opportunities to use it during this election period. Okay, my eyesight's not really good. Anybody else? Why don't you just shout out if you... Oh, okay. Renee, I'm going to call out the question.
I'm calling for the question.
Okay. So, do I have a motion to approve the proposed budget?
We already.
Oh, yeah, no second is required. We've discussed it. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? Great. Done. Great.
Thank you, Jenny. I promise you that this board is a very responsible board, and they will not, they will be very careful about the way the money is spent. So, proposed bylaws amendments by Young, would you like to come up? And we're really near the end. I think we might even end on time.
I'll see what I can do. So in 2023, we revised our bylaws to comply with the League of Women Voters of California. This year, we were asked to make amendments required by the National League for the Transformation Project. And then we took the opportunity to clean up a few typos. Let me explain very quickly the impact of the Transformation Project, which basically makes the league more accessible to, thank you. Its goal is to make the league more accessible to all people, to increase diversity in our league. Currently, local leagues set and collect membership dues. In the future, the National League will collect those dues, and they will set the dues to be consistent. Currently, the dues may differ from one league to another, and so there will be a consistent dues collected from every member and set by National. Whereas now, we actually vote and approve our own dues. We will not do that in the future. In the future, rather than joining this league here at our website, members will go to the national website and register there, renew their membership, and pay for their membership. And currently, we collect the dues and we send them to the state league and to the national league. In the future, the National League, having collected the dues, will then dispense those monies collected to the state and the local leagues. Any questions? Yes.
Do you have any idea what percentage will go back to the local?
20%. Oh, yes.
How will they know? Are people going to have to say when they?
You will register.
Local
Right.
Is, or are they going to do by address?
I think you pick your league.
And they'll do it by address.
And they'll do it by address.
It
So,
seems like it could be, some problems there.
yeah. If you go to the national website now, you can sort of click down to find your local league. Yes, and so they will know, and you will be associated with league. Which actually brings up one more point. So currently, when you renew your membership or you join, you're offered the opportunity to make a donation at the same time. But in the future, when you do this at the national website, that donation will be divided just as the membership dues are. So rather than receiving the full donation, the league will only receive 20%. Therefore, we ask our members that when we complete this transformation, that when you join or renew your membership on the national website, you do so, and then you come to our website and you make your donation so that our league will receive the full benefit of your donation. Yes?
And there are great numbers of people who need to renew their membership in September or something, like soon.
So my understanding is that this will not go into effect until after January 2025.
So we would ask them then not to make donations with that membership, but to wait till January and make donations to our league, correct?
There's going to be a huge rollout nationally, so we will.
So between now and.
So between now and when you hear about the Transformation Project, join and renew as you always have done. Nothing is happening yet, but the National League asked us to revise our bylaws now, because it's going to happen before our next annual meeting. So continue to join and renew at the local website as you have been doing, and we will let you know, and you will know when you can't do that anymore. Okay?
Where's our script? Where's the script?
It's right here. Jenny took it. Just
Okay.
go through.
All right, so at this point, I need a motion to approve the board recommended proposed bylaws amendments. Do I have a motion, please? Thank you, Gary. And no second is needed because this is recommended by the board. Any questions or clarifications needed? Yes?
In 1C, it says, it looks like the students would no longer be exempt from paying dues.
That is correct, sadly, yes. But actually, that's on a bonus side, the new transformation will allow for sort of a sliding pay-as-you-can possibility with a $20 minimum. So that is a benefit, and that'll be national. Anything else? Okay. Oh, yes.
Do you get, in doing this, in 2025, do you get some other benefits from being an individual who signs up as for the national? You don't have to go into a box.
Okay, well, I think as an individual, it's going to be pretty transparent, but as a league, it will allow for some reduction in cost or effort for some of the smaller leagues, for example, who don't have as many resources. They'll have a lot of the administration required to manage league business will be handled nationally.
And she's a member of the National League anyway. She may not know that.
I already am.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So-
but I understand it's a benefit to this smaller organization.
Correct. It-
Okay,
Okay, I'm sorry, but we really do need to move on. Okay, so I call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you, Marianne. I think we only have two more things to do. We need to approve our nominating committee. These are members, general members, not board members, who do the work of recruiting and nominating to the board. We have Nancy Sublette, Jane Dunmeyer. We needed one more nominee. Do we have a nomination from the floor? Chris.
On behalf of the nominating committee, we would like to nominate Jill Cooper as the third member. Note that she's not at the meeting.
She's not here. Does she know? Does she know, Chris?
Oh, did I have to tell her first? Yes, she knows about it and she did volunteer.
Okay, so we have a third person, Jill Cooper, who also chairs our Youth Voter Initiative. We have those three members. Do I have a motion to approve these three members to the nominating committee? Mandy Butler moves. Do we have a second? Ann Olmstead seconds. Any questions? We will appoint 2 board members to the nominating committee at the first board meeting of the new board. So there will be 5 people on the nominating committee, just so you know that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Great. And now, election of our new officers and directors. You see them here. Marianne Clancy, our current secretary, has generously stepped up to be president. Thank you, Marianne. It's great. She's going to be great. Jenny Holler, treasurer. Carol Parker, secretary. Thank you, Carol. She's currently our chair of the Climate Interest Group. Kathy Green, VP Advocacy in the back. Thank you, Kathy, coming back on the board. I will be chairing voter service. Chris Harris, thank you, Chris, membership. Mona Pastor, events. And Ronnie C., director at large, who is sick and couldn't be here today. So, do I have are there any nominations from the floor? Do I have a motion to approve this slate of nominees to the board? Ann moves. Gary seconds. Any questions? Clarifying questions or comments? I want to actually thank our outgoing board who are not here. Anna Patino, who did a lot of work this past year, helped a lot, and Dawn Gundert, who is our VP of Advocacy. I'd like to thank them for their work, and thank our current board who worked with me these past 2 years. It's been a real honor, to lead this group. So thank you very much. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. I'm going to hand back over to Marianne so she can say a few words as your new president.
Thank you, everyone. I do have a few remarks, and first I want to thank Rosette for your unflagging energy, your broad vision, and your leadership. You set the highest standard, and you have improved our league tremendously during your tenure. All of us on the board, and I need you. Oh, this is very time-sensitive comment. All of us on the board join together in thanking and honoring you, Rosette. We'd like to present you with a token of thanks. But there's an important metaphor that I would like to make. I will go ahead and say, we will be presenting you with a beautiful orchid, I believe, symbolizing how, under your leadership, our league has bloomed and grown to over 200 members. Thank you. That's you. The entire league is so delighted to see you continuing as voter service. There is no task more important in this election year. Thank you. Here we are.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I got it. Okay. Wait, no.
I forgot my camera, so take pictures.
Okay. So, why don't you finish up, Mark?
Okay. Rosette is a tough act to follow, but I am really committed to doing my best. When I worked at BASF, our VP had a habit of coming into the office every day and greeting us with, "What have you done for me today?" This always bothered me. By the time I rose to management, I had my own daily habit. I would visit each of my direct reports, and I would walk into the office and say, "How are you doing? Do you need anything from me? Is there anything on this desk that you would like me to handle?" It was great. I joined the league only a year ago, but I have served, and I currently serve on other nonprofit boards, and I do have a lot to learn, but I feel I do have a lot to offer. And I know that I can depend on all of you to help me, not just on the board, there's at least 3 past presidents on the board, but also many experienced and past board members among this company. Each of you has a passion for your portfolio or your committee, and you have your own vision. I passionately believe in our mission, and I commit to supporting each director and committee chair to ensure that you can fully focus and pursue your part of our mission. I honor and respect your knowledge and experience, and I seek to learn from you and to support your work. This is an election year, and we have a lot to do. The fact that all of you are here today proves your dedication and your commitment to our league. I'm counting on you to stay involved or get involved to whatever degree you can and help us. And I know that working together, we're going to have a remarkable year. Thank you. Okay, so now we will accept directions to the board. This is really important. We need your input. And there's index cards on your cards. Get writing. Mary.
Thank you for taking the question, and thank you for being here and volunteering. I am Mary Thompson. In the view of the transformation that's about to happen thanks to the National League, I want the board to think about carefully the thing we've always been known by, which is a grassroots organization. And we're definitely going to benefit from a national focus. But I want this board to think about how we maintain the grassroots appeal of this league in the face of the benefits that will come from a more national notoriety. But I think that's a big ask, and it's a big thing to consider. So I hope that you'll take some time of your very busy schedule to deliberate on that.
Thank you, Mary. And maybe you and I can talk about that, actually. That'd be great. it would be helpful to have you write your comments so that I don't have to remember them all. So please use those index cards. As Rosette says, we take those suggestions very seriously, and they really help guide our league. Ginny?
I should have asked, in line with the grassroots organization, if anyone here wants to serve on the audit committee next year, I welcome you. It'll be a learning experience for all of us. And we don't
Audit?
even have a financial background.
What is?
The audit committee?
Yeah, she means
Oh,
budget.
no, did I say audit?
Yes.
Water. Budget.
Budget. I just got back from vacation. Yes, budget.
So if you're interested in the budget committee, please see Jenny or me or any board member. All right, that is the last order of business, and unless there's anything else, I would like to adjourn this meeting at 1:08.